Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/slash Tales from Tech Support. In today's episode, the Google box. I cannot access my computer, aka how a power failure confused a user with poor power off habits. It's not the system's fault, it's your fault. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. The Google box. Anytime someone comes up with a theory about how the government is tracking us all with COVID vaccines or conspiring with BigCorp to stockpile their favorite cereal and drive up the prices, I know they've never worked in the public sector. If you have, you know that they would be incapable of thinking of it, ill-equipped to execute it, and physically indisposed to avoid bragging about it if they pulled off something so cool. Here's how the employment turnover works. You have a team with a certain number of roles. Anytime there's a vacancy, the new person comes in full of ideas and ways to improve the ridiculous systems, so they try. They bang their head against all the walls, floor, and ceiling. They do way more work than everyone else in the team. Eventually, they say F***ck this and quit. This process repeats ad infinitum until, through the probability of deviation, a slacker gets the rotating vacancy. That slacker looks around and sees a world where they can get away with doing no work. That seat is now filled forever. And it stays like this until someone retires, dies, emigrates, or is hit by a meteorite. This was my experience. Sat in the office, about halfway to quitting, when the IT director sticks his head around the door and announces proudly to the team, "I've bought us a Google box." This is quite surprising that some equipment has been bought without any involvement of the people who look after the network and servers. Like I said, I was only halfway to quitting, and I'd still be surprised by things like this. I was also surprised that I'd have to fight and argue about having an extra redundant hard drive in a server that had no backup server. It wasn't that I wanted more money, but the space would be the total of 2 hard drives, and not 3, like the boss wanted. They were so tight with money that everything was a fight. Yet now we have a Google box. What's that do then? I ask. Well, the boss starts, you plug it into your network and it indexes all the files on your network much like Google does, and then you configure an address, and you can search your own network, and you don't even have to manage it. A large part of IT design is looking for the problems. It annoys a lot of people because you piss on their bonfire. If their bonfire is next to a box of fireworks, it's worth pissing on though. Not that a bonfire isn't great, but it needs some work. I start thinking about the Google box for about 3 seconds. I literally think it took me this long to come up with the question, and in all the time of looking at it online and going through the purchasing stage, not once did my boss think, "So how do you stop it indexing something? Why would you need to?" he dumbly asks with his dumb face. Well, we don't want HR and finance records available and searchable for all to see, even a preview or cached version. How do you prevent that? 3 things happened after I asked that question. 1. The boss said, I'll have to look into that. 2. The boss left our office, far less proudly that he entered. 3. The Google box sat on top of one of the server racks and used until the day I left. Return it and get our money back? Nah, why would we do that? I cannot access my computer, aka how a power failure confused a user with poor power off habits. Been a while since my last post here. Been a while since my last job in IT. But I come with a short one because sometimes I cannot believe how incompetent some people can be when it comes to basic computer usage in 2021. In this story that takes place during one of the many lockdowns we've experienced over these past 2 years, I was working from home as an IT engineer for an undisclosed MSP. The customers I'd work with are staff members responsible for either teaching English as a second language students, college students, or recruitment partners for job hunting services. Our systems are pretty heavily into the whole Microsoft everything as a service, single sign-on ecosystem. Office 365, MS Teams, etc., etc. Even logging into the Wi-Fi in Office relies on your current login details in AD. During lockdown, we had to overhaul our IT security so that certain systems couldn't be accessed without a company VPN, which changed configurations like 3 times and didn't support some protocol that Windows insisted on enabling for the VPN profile. This is very relevant, I assure you. One day, while I'm seeing to my current project of ensuring all devices in our network are running the latest version of Windows, I get an urgent support request from a user. Let's call this person Diana. Diana tells me that she cannot access the computer, and that she needs access immediately. Now, many of you might be thinking expired password. I was at first too. Our password policy is that passwords invalidate after 6 months, but you can still log into the computer if you aren't connected to the domain. I reset her password and get her to try and log in, but she just says she cannot access her computer. I ask her to tell me if there are any errors when she tries to log in. Same response. I ask her for her asset tag, so I can remote in. She gives me this, but our remote management software doesn't see her device as online. I tried asking her to turn it off and on again, and I actually get a new response this time. She tells me that the computer is sleeping. The way she said it, it felt weirdly phrased. After pressing some more, I discovered that the monitor was actually going into sleep mode, and she was just turning the monitor on and off. When she wasn't using it. To save you the blow-by-blow, I then spent about 15 minutes getting her to understand that her PC wasn't the monitor, but the thing the monitor was plugged into, in this case her work laptop. She couldn't understand why it didn't just work because that's how it had worked for so long until now. It turned out that her house had experienced a power failure overnight, which lasted several hours. All our devices after being imaged are configured to never switch off while on charge, but they do go into hibernate if they are left on for over 2 hours on battery. When her power restored, the machine had already switched off and had to be manually switched on, but she had never done this in the lifespan of her using the device. She just thought the monitor she had attached to it was all she needed to do. So after that little lesson, I took the opportunity to make sure she could log in, that everything was working, and called it a day. 40-minute call, just to get her to press the right power button. It's not the system's fault, it's your fault. I'm not sure if this is worthy of TFTS, or if it's just a rant. It might be just an excuse for me to vent, in which case, thank you guys, you are cheaper than a therapist. I work for an assets management firm as a guy who manages their software and databases, not an IT guy, as I don't deal with hardware, and IT can't troubleshoot the issues I deal with. We have a neat software that keeps track of our transactions and balances. Basically, it shows you how much you own for each asset in each fund, and has workflows to start a new trade to buy or sell those assets, among many other useful things. There are many checks the software does to conform to fiscal regulations as well as security compliances. For example, it won't let you buy assets from a tobacco firm if your fund only allows a certain percentage of its capital to be invested in that industry, and most importantly, it doesn't allow you to oversell a position ever. Now, what happens within the software is not what happens in the real world. The software keeps track of the orders, but doesn't actually push the trades. The way it works is, traders are on the phone with other traders, or third-party brokers, agreeing on a deal, then both parties, figuratively, shake hands, and everybody goes on their merry way to scribble their checks and balances on their respective platforms. In my case, the traders check the system to see how much cash we have available, decide what's best to be invested in, do their phone calls, and then send an email to the middle office grunts who capture that trade in the system so that tomorrow the new amounts are reflected. At least, that's how it should work. The thing is, you can start many sale orders for the same trade, but only execute them if you have enough capital for that position. Again, we cannot oversell. So, if I own $100,000 of product A, I can book 2 sales for $100,000, but if I execute the first one, then I cannot execute the second one because I no longer own enough of product A. Only executed transactions are sent to the back office and are considered official amounts. So, we get an email from $user with oversell in the subject, which again, is a big no-no since it could expose the firm to liabilities and fines, so of course I panic. I start investigating, but find that the software still doesn't allow oversales, so I sigh in relief. I go back to $user saying preposterous. Our software doesn't allow oversales, with a screenshot of the error message saying you cannot oversell a position, and I leave it at that. $user, however, comes back saying, well, the system allowed me to sell a position twice. Puzzled, I check all trades, check audit trails, balances, and all I can see is one sale captured. I reply that's not possible, there is only one sale executed. There are a couple of orders booked, but none of those can be executed since we no longer hold that position. Well, it turns out $user sold the position twice by phone. Whereas other traders check the balances before taking a decision, this trader has a group of analysts booking orders based on those balances which the trader then executes via phone call, without checking the balances first, and then pushes it on the software. So, what happened was that $Analyst 1 thought it was a good idea to sell position A, but $Analyst 2 had the same idea, so both booked the sales in the system. Then $User made phone calls to confirm one trade, executed the trade on the system, then later that day made a second phone call for the other trade, and when trying to push the second execution, the system blurted back you cannot oversell a position. And somehow this is the fault of the software.